Good evening, YouTube. Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. In this one, we are covering the next 3 days because there are slight risks for each of them, and I do see some potential for even upgrades being possible. So we're going to go ahead and get into all of that. Start out with Wednesday. Wednesday looks very interesting. It could be a little bit of a sleeper too. In fact, there's an analog that this setup is being compared to from a 2019 tornado event. Not going to get into that one. That will probably be a topic that will be discussed on my Discord. If you want to join that, link will be in the description. Also, I've noticed a couple of videos have done pretty decent as of late. In fact, there's a message from my Discord going off on my computer. But anyway, I've noticed the last video has done pretty well. As a result, of course, if you're new or if you've been here for a while, of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Also hit that share button, especially with the next few days being potentially active. We want to get the word out to as many people as possible because some people may get caught by surprise by this. With that being said, let's get into things. So here we are looking at the Storm Prediction Center's page where we will be looking at the next 3 days here. We have 3 slight risk, one for each day, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. One in particular has my interest, and that's tomorrow's slight risk. I was trying to make a video this morning actually talking about this, but a lot has changed since then, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't make it because I probably would have had to revise it this evening anyway. But that being said, the main threats with this have been hail and wind. Up until recently, where we've started to see an uptick in the tornado threat, particularly across Kansas and sneaking its way into parts of southeastern Nebraska. I do think that there is also potential for this area being stretched a little further to the east based off of what I've been seeing on this last model run. We'll get into the model runs in just a minute. So we're going to have to be on guard for all conditions over here. And then this is also set up to be a late night event or a late evening event. So this is going to happen after sunset too, most likely. So with that being said, there's also some fail parameters here, including a capping inversion, which could be good news. If these storms can't break the cap, the severe threat will be diminished. But if the cap breaks, we could see some real problems. But that is our day 2 threat. Our day 3 threat. Oh, my Discord's rocking right now. I don't really like that. Don't need that. Sorry, guys. I'm going to mute you. But in the meantime, and yes, you're seeing my screen right now. I hope you guys don't mind. But this is our day 2 threat here. This has actually been talked about for almost the last week, but a lot of things have kind of changed with this. We're still looking at an all-hazard type event. There's really no dominant hazard type in this as of yet. I lean towards it being more so damaging winds than anything else. But to say that we aren't going to see any tornadoes from that would be foolish. But there is no hatched risk area at the moment. So we're kind of in a wait-and-see mode. Do I think a hatch risk area will be issued with this? Hard to say. I do see some parameters coming together that could lean towards maybe an increased tornado threat, but like I said, some fail parameters are there, and it leads to a little bit of uncertainty. Then, of course, there's Friday too. Here's our Friday area, and I find this area really interesting because a little secondary trough is going to take shape off a little bit off this way, and what's going to end up happening is this area is going to work its way over towards central Louisiana here and parts of southeastern Texas. With the moisture returns that we could be seeing here, given the stronger winds with the upper levels, this could cause some problems, and it could even persist in a marginal risk or maybe even another slight risk on Saturday. It's going to be hard to get into that given the range of the NAM, which is the model we're going to be looking at today. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and get into it. So let's jump a little too far forward. Here's the NAM here. And here's us looking at about 34,000 feet up into the air. This is usually a good idea of what's going on with the upper level winds. In my, I have a YouTube playlist where I've made videos explaining the troughs and ridges. So basically, this is our trough right here coming into play. We also, when we see these troughs, we often look for jet streaks, which are these brighter colors right here. Those represent stronger winds. We do start to see one take shape here. However, it's not very impressive by Thursday and a little bit too far to the north. Positioning of these jet streaks are key components because it's not just one particular parameter you're looking for with severe weather. It's several. You look for moisture returns. You look for wind shear. You look for lift. Your lifting mechanism is going to be all the way up here. So if you're further away from your lifting mechanism, sometimes you aren't able to get storms to fire. And that's what the trick to Wednesday's setup is. The stronger the forcing, it's usually indicated by these ISO bars here. The closer they are together, the stronger the forcing. These are pretty spread apart. So this is a setup that is semi-ideal for supercells. But the problem, and here's a good example. I'm looking at a sounding right now. Problem is, we can't. If this cap is too strong, and you have no forcing, this is not going to break, and this storm will not happen, basically. But look at the energy around the atmosphere. Look at the energy, the convective available potential energy. Can't believe I can't get that word out right now. But over 3,000 joules per kilogram. Usually, an environment that's 1,000 joules to 1,500 is sufficient enough for severe weather. This is what you would consider as an explosive environment. So if we get this capping inversion to break, which is indicated right here, I'm about to circle it for you, but you can get this to break right here, we could see this. I know that was a bad line. You have to forgive me for that. But hazards are there for Wednesday. In fact, there's some other soundings and radiographs that I've saved from this day that kind of lean into a slightly more significant tornado threat here. In fact, I'm going to pull that up for you real quick. So here's what here's probably the most impressive sounding that I've seen so far today from the NAM as far as Wednesday's threat. And this has a pretty notable tornado threat here. We have a very strong low-level helicity curve here, or radiograph curve here. Strong storm relative helicity here, 406 meters squared per second squared. Very charged up atmosphere and a very high significant tornado parameter number as a result. Also plenty of decape here, which is usually indicative of a damaging wind threat as well. So this could be a bit of a problem here if this persists here. And in this situation, based off what we're seeing with the cap here, it does end up breaking according to the NAM. So this is definitely something that we have to be very watchful of. And the timing of this is actually right around dark, right around sunset. So odds are if these storms do break out and they start to go severe, this will be happening after dark. So make sure you have a way to get warnings, whether it's no weather radio, or make sure you have your cell phone on ring for that night. I know it's a little bit meddlesome, but it could very well keep you safe in this instance. Because when you have storm setups like this and you see these kinds of numbers, these are not the type to mess around with. Again, this is what we were seeing at the upper levels of the atmosphere for Wednesday. We go into Thursday. If I can get this to work. There we go. See that trough begin to go into place for Thursday. Severe weather potential is going to be higher across this region. It's going to be a little earlier in the day. Again, that jet streak's a little too far to the north, but watch what happens here. You kind of see a little bit of an ejection setup begin to take place over here. And what ends up happening is this new trough comes in, and the jet streak comes in a little bit further behind, but there's enough energy here to where this can cause a little bit of active weather over here, especially across Louisiana in particular. southeastern Texas also is in play, but most of the parameters I've seen on Friday are mainly centered over central Louisiana. When we look at the mid levels of the atmosphere, this is about 700 millibars, or maybe about 16,000 feet up, I would say. This is what we end up seeing. Usually when we look at the mid levels, we always look for these little shortwave, little weaker amplitude troughs, and we do end up seeing that happening here. And of course, like I said before, the strongest parameters seem to be lower to the surface with this setup, which is kind of alarming. I clicked the wrong sounding here. I think I'm a little bit late on the timing, but right around this region here is where I think we could see some real problems here. This is a marginal tornado threat, nothing compared to the one that I showed off of my files here that I picked up on a little earlier. But here's a good example of that capping in version 2. The hope is that this cap breaks. The cap is represented by this little red number that's kind of hard to see here. That negative 157 for those of you that can see it. The higher the negative number here, the stronger the parameter, the stronger the cap is. If this holds, we don't have any issues. But also this storm looks like it could be pretty elevated too, so hail looks like a greater threat as well as damaging winds. D-Cape's pretty strong with this one as well. We actually now go into Thursday here. This is looking into 21Z. The mid-level jet, not very impressive here. Again, jet streak a little too far to the north here to really be concerned with severe weather. Like I said, a lot of this has to do with timing. So nothing really going on there, but again, watch what happens on Friday. See a little maximum popping up here, and watch what happens when we click on this one. There we go. Not much of a cap in place here, only a -7, so we're not going to be having that same fail-safe that we had over Kansas on Wednesday night. So that being said, pretty notable curve here in the hordeograph here, the low levels. Not the strongest wind shear vectors that I've seen, but it's there though. Furthermore, there is a decent little STP number here. So a tornado is not only possible, but it could even get strong if conditions are right. This is a little bit more of an average kind of Cape event where we're seeing up to about 1,300 to 1,500 joules per kilogram. We're mainly sitting at 1,320 at the surface and 1,423 at the mid levels. That being said, still a potentially dangerous day. Not quite as dangerous as Wednesday night could be right now. But again, also we have to look on Saturday because that trough does persist. Maybe towards southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, and even into southern Georgia. We may have to keep an eye on severe weather throughout the day. Mainly thinking it might be more so early Saturday where the problems would emerge. Last things to look at here on the wind will be the low-level jet, and this is where you really start to see the clarity behind why there's so much concern for Wednesday night. Look what happens as we go into the evening on Wednesday here. Look at this little area that pops up here where we're getting up to about 50 knots. You really are looking for about 30 or 40 knots for tornadic development. Once you get above 50, that's usually a pretty big red flag. And this is towards the 7 o'clock hour. It's a marginal tornado threat here. It's the same. I think it's the same sounding I actually clicked a little earlier. If we go a little further off to the east here, we might have a better sounding. Boom. There you go. Cap broken. High STP. Ridiculous Cape. And stronger curve for the hordeograph. So there you go. There's the proof's in the pudding. You see those high low-level jet values, usually trouble is not too far away behind it. And then look what happens in 03. See, that's where things really get alarming. By this point, the cap breaks across the board here. Look at that. That's a pretty strong low-level hordeograph curve here. Cap is just about broken here. Storm relative felicity is ridiculous at almost 600 meters squared per second squared. Explosive environment late into the evening. This is an alarming look for an overnight storm setup. So let's hope that somehow our fail parameters come into play here and stop this from occurring. Here's that setup where I think there could be a few severe storms over towards Missouri early in the day, especially with these low-level jet values being where they are. Here's a marginal severe sounding that we have here. Instability is kind of limited, so that's why we're kind of uncertain about things. But to say that hail is out of the question here would be foolish, and maybe even some damaging winds with that strong low-level jet possible. In fact, I have yet another sounding I could show you here. I'm going to pause real quick. So here's another sounding going on right here. This is towards Thursday morning. This leans more towards severe here. There is a bit of a cap in place as well, which could limit activity. But there is enough decape here and decent lapse rates as well that would lead me to think that hail and damaging winds are still very much possible here. The question is, will we get enough forcing for that to break? I think later into the day that would be possible. The timing is going to be very key with this. But that's pretty much what we have going on with the wind pattern for that day. And then once we get into Friday, low-level jet actually is not quite as impressive as the mid-level jet across that region. And then, of course, we have to watch this little pocket over here towards the southeast. We'll go ahead and click that real quick. Probably not going to be too many indicators. Okay, there is one. And actually, that's a pretty impressive helicity curve there. It's a low STP, mainly due to the lack of energy in the atmosphere, but wind shear could become a problem. So we'll be keeping an eye on Saturday, of course. We'll get into the details of that in a later video. Let's go ahead and look at the moisture returns while we're at it. And then we'll probably look at stuff like CAPE and STP values tomorrow, because I already know this video is starting to run a little bit long. Oops, wrong parameter there. So here are the dew points at the surface. The blue area is the main area you need to be looking for. Those are dew points a little bit over 60 degrees. When you have moisture returns heading that far to the north, combined with that low-level jet and the lift, that usually creates instability. And with instability and lift, you get fireworks. So by the time we get into 21Z into OOZ on Wednesday night into Thursday, that's where we have our problems starting to emerge. We're getting to the mid-60s at this point. Our dry line set up right here. Then we watch this progress a little bit off to the east here. This is by 21Z. We start to see activity beginning to fire across Texas here. See a tornado threat begin to emerge here, but of course, an elongated storm relative felicity here, but not a very good kinematic setup here. Capping inversion isn't in place though, so any storms that fire here will have potential to produce pretty quickly without too much inhibition. That being said here, we get into Friday, look at those moisture returns over towards Louisiana, getting into the 70-degree dew point range. And then we can see some moisture advection beginning to occur into early Saturday across parts of Alabama and maybe even Georgia here. So another day to watch very closely. So that's all that I have for this video tonight. I'm probably going to try to do something again in the morning where I can get into the more finite parameters really quickly. I try to break these videos up so that way they aren't 30 minutes long a piece, because I know not everybody wants to watch that. But if you know anybody in these areas, definitely make sure that you are helping to get the watch and warning process out there, because these are developing quickly. So there may not be as many updates from their local news network to help get the warning out faster. So that's what some of us YouTubers are here for in reality. But that being said, if you like anything I did here, of course, another way to help get those warnings out is hit that like button, hit that share button too, share the video so that way we can get people better informed. And of course, hit that subscribe button so we can get into the algorithm and get out to more people. That being said, you guys have a good night. Take care. I'll be talking with you again soon. If you want to know more stuff about severe weather, check out some of my playlists and also check out the Discord. The link to that will be in the description. But anyway, you guys take care. It's been Metalhead Weatherman. Have a good night. I will see you guys very soon.